to see many familiar faces here, and I'm delighted to be here as a bit of a last-minute speaker, and it's a great opportunity. I'm just going to very briefly introduce what Parent-Infant Partnership does and show you a video, and then go on to what is infant mental health and why it matters, and how you can get to be part of the conversation around infant mental health that's happening nationally. So we're all about the importance of early relationships. The charity Parent-Infant Partnership UK is an umbrella organisation which is growing a network of PIP services across the UK, which offers a range of evidence-based psychotherapeutic parent-infant interventions. It's localised, it fits the different partnerships that are available and the different clinical skills that are available. They provide a preventative perinatal infant mental health strategy and pathway through relationship support to babies, toddlers, and their families who are struggling to secure a positive attachment beginning in pregnancy. And I love the fact that I'm following an Olympian. But when I was thinking about the pool, and I was thinking about the under fives within that pool context, it was difficult for me not to think about the symbolism of all that water and the primal potential that begins in pregnancy for each one of us, and why that matters for future generations. We offer a 3-year start-up package to support local provision of psychotherapeutic services to parents, carers, and their under-twos. Parent-Infant Partnership is also secretariat to the all-party parliamentary group Conception to Age 2, first 1001 days, and we're very privileged to facilitate the 1001 Critical Days Manifesto, which many of you are familiar with, but many of you have not necessarily come across it. And I'll be at the stand at lunchtime. Come and get a copy of the manifesto and come and see how you can get on board with becoming a member of the all-party parliamentary group. Last year, we established the UK's first Infant Mental Health Week with key stakeholders across health, education and social care, which saw a reach of 10 million.
Yeah. They used to say that when you have the baby, you feel that strong love. You just say, I just want to take care of this baby. Ah, so cute, feeling like that. But when I have this, I didn't feel nothing.
At the time, I was scared to love her. It'd be giving her too much emotion from me, which was too much love, basically.
Sometimes there's deeper roots than we realise to do with childhood, and how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive ourselves then as parents.
I felt like the only person in the world who'd ever hated pregnancy. So the idea that there was a service out there for someone like me, I was really surprised and really happy.
Those first 1001 days are the most important in the way a child is going to grow up, and it is a false economy not to make sure that every parent who needs that support is able to access that support and become the very best parent that they can.
If we understood just how important these under-twos period of our human development, because around 80% of our brain development is here, it lays the foundation for our potential and achieving our potential as human beings. If the penny truly was dropping for policymakers and practitioners and how that filters about how the way that our budgets are spent, looking at mental health and a preventative strategy, this is the period to invest, and yet we are simply not seeing that.
If you don't have the foundations, then actually anything you do afterwards is going to be catch up at best. And yet in mental health, as you say, for years we've ignored that foundational period.
Parent-Infant Partnership UK is trying to establish psychotherapeutic services in local authorities to very actively help families all the time, it's natural to us to be the same parent that we were parented as. So if you were loved and adored and looked after, that will be instinctive to you to be the same with your baby. But if you were ignored, or even worse, if you were abused or inconsistently treated, then naturally to you as a parent, you won't just fall into being able to form that secure bond. So the psychotherapy helps people to come to terms with perhaps their own disappointment in their own childhood.
A lot of thoughts coming new. You think about everything that happened to you already in the past, all the bad things that happened to you. And then you see the baby, this just came to bring me more problems. And you don't have a support, what are you going to end up doing? Now, it's been already nearly a year that we've been doing this therapy, and I feel really confident.
Gradually you can begin to feel enough trust that you can tell me some things that are very difficult to talk about.
Yes.
You've been able to do that. You've been very courageous, I think.
My one depression, the dad as well has his own depression, so we used to have a lot of stress, both of us, and coming here really made us more solid. Yes.
Oh, for me, thank you.
It's been a constant in our life that I can think, well, if I can just get to Tuesday when we see Michael, maybe I can get through. We've come here and I've been at my lowest, and it's been kind of a make or break situation.
So many people don't realise what we carry with us and kind of project. We're learning to get over that, you know, and be the parents we want to be.
We both had difficult upbringings, and it's allowed us to kind of look at what's been good and what's been not so good in our upbringings, and how we want to kind of use that to bring up Tabitha.
Babies have no comparisons. So as far as the baby's concerned, oh God, this is what I've got. I better adapt to it as quickly as possible. And the adaptation is an adaptation on the level of the mind, and the mind is everything. It's the neurobiology, it's the hormones, it's the psychology. And if you're adapting to a parent with a mental health problem, or a parent who's distracted, or a parent who has conflicts from the way they were parented, so that when they look at the baby, they don't see the baby, they see a representation of their own past, then they're going to adapt to that. They've got no choice.
Over time, a sensitive therapist will be able to help that mum and dad, or just mum, to understand the baby's needs and to listen to the baby's needs. And that's where the impact on the baby's brain development is so profound. And literally the baby that is well treated and loved and well attended to will develop that sense for life that the world's a good place and generally people are kind. And so that baby will grow up with self-worth, with the ability to cope.
It's great that we are now, through our charity, rolling out a network of PIPs so that parents and their children in Liverpool, in Northamptonshire, in Croydon and so on can now get that advantage. But this is just scratching the surface. What we need to achieve is a network of PIPs throughout the whole country.
A mum's such a big thing in a child's life, and not to have one was a real big thing for me. So having Wendy sort of just guiding me and just sort of just being there and saying, well, try this. I tried it and it's worked. Chloe is such a happier child, and she's not always whinging or anything, because she used to just whinge constantly.
It's often about saying, you have that in your history, you've got this happening now. It makes sense that you're experiencing these fears or anxiety.
If it wasn't for Wendy, I don't think I know where I'd be, to be honest, right now. It's really helped a lot that I could speak openly about it and not be judged.
We're looking for the birdies now. Any family or friends, they always want to come and see the baby now, don't they? Because he's a new kid on the block. And I feel as though Michael is there to make sure that we as parents are still okay. It's been times when you can't see a way out, when you're trying to deal with just everyday life and personal problems. It just makes you feel as though you're not alone. But I do feel, from my point of view, that you're making sure that we are okay.
this early intervention really works. You know, you kind of really see, might start working with a depressed mum who doesn't love her baby. And I think that idea of helping mum love her baby, you really see playing out.
We mainly work with refugees who settled here or who just came, and then domestic violence and other things we deal, and rape. When I met Carol, I had a client who actually didn't know if she was living or dead. With Carol's guiding and helping, she's trying to hold on to life. And second client is the same. And I strongly believe if we didn't have that help, both of them would probably given up by now. But imagine they're 5 years old and mother never touched them. How do you think that child would feel? Who's going to help that child?
The money you spend in the earliest years supporting that really good beginning will save you a fortune down the line. And there is some very good research being carried out by the Nobel Prize winner Heckman, who has this graph that shows that the money you invest in the very earliest period, in fact pre-birth, is the biggest bang for your buck. Whereas once you start actually doing the firefighting at the other end, sort of when you're 25 and you're already got desperate mental health problems, or you're not in work, or you are worse, you're sort of on drugs or experiencing or perpetrating domestic violence, all those things, those costs then start to massively escalate.
Let's deal with the root of the problems and the intergenerational cycle of poor parenting that has caused so many of those problems, rather than just firefight the symptoms. And if we can do that, we can solve a lot of problems for society, we can save a lot of money for society as well, and we can have a much more successful and happy generation of children growing up.
Oh, Chloe, you're funny.
And the eyes and the ear and the mouth and the nose, head and shoulder, knees and toes and knees and toes. Head and shoulder, knees and toes and knees and toes. Head and shoulder, knees and toes and knees and toes. And the eye and the ear and the mouth and the nose, head and shoulder, knees and toes and knees and toes.
All of those families, and we have a network of currently 9 parent-infant partnerships we just established over 5 years ago. Most of those parents, particularly the mother that you saw sitting on the floor that had a tattoo down one arm, her little one, they've been going to our Live Pit parent-infant partnership for 2 years. The mother was suicidal every single day of her pregnancy. And what was on offer was cognitive behavioural therapy, which is very helpful for many. But actually what that mother desperately wanted was the opportunity, once she'd given birth, to be able to sit with her baby and with her partner. And as the baby was growing into infancy and toddlerhood, to be able to work through. And what Parent-Infant Partnership, why it's so different, is not a perinatal adult mental health service. It's a relationship-based preventative service which looks at the risk factors involved and supports the well-being of the next generation, as well as the adult and the family dynamics, by concentrating on the relationship as the patient, if you want to put it in that kind of clinical terms. The eminent child paediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott, and do go to the exhibition on attachment that Sally's referring to, which will put a lot of this in further context for you if you're not so aware of some of the history where we're using the term much more, attachment and bonding. But he wrote, "There is no such thing as a baby." He went on to say, "There is only a baby and someone." The point he was making was that in the early years of life, an infant's very existence is dependent on others, particularly the primary caregiver and other significant adults. This stark statement sums up what we know about early childhood development, a baby's early interactions with others, particularly the primary caregiver, are crucial not only for his physical survival, but for his developing sense of self, as well as his skills and mastery of the world around him. These factors are central to laying down sound foundations for future social and emotional development. This presentation will touch upon the evidence around early child development in the context of the parent-infant relationship, touching on areas of research including infant mental health and neuroscience. So a brief history of research into early childhood development. Since Winnicott's insights in the 1950s and 60s, much research has been done to explore exactly why the early years of life are so crucial for development and how relationships with caregivers influence this. Now, I know you'll know much of this, but I never think it hurts to be reminded about why we're all here to change the conversation for babies, toddlers, and their futures. Winnicott himself came from the psychoanalytic tradition, building on the ideas of Freud. This is also one of the disciplines that informed attachment theory, as developed by the attachment theory of John Bowlby and later Mary Ainsworth. After psychoanalysis, cognitive theories began to dominate psychology in the latter half of the 20th century, leading to thinkers who looked at how children develop an understanding of the world around them and how this development is fostered through relationships. It's all about relationships. Any change about the future is all about relationships now. In the past 20 years, with advances in brain imaging technology and neuroscience, much research has been done to look at early brain development, to add an extra layer of understanding to early childhood development and parent-infant relationships. There's a new language for early child development. This increasing focus on neuroscience, particularly the findings around the rate of brain development in the early years of life, has led to the emergence of the concept of the first 1001 days. It's a catchy policy tune. The main message of this agenda or phrase is that the brain development that happens in the first 1001 days from conception to age 2 is crucial in forming the foundation of a baby's brain development and setting them up for life. This does not mean that outcomes are completely fixed by experiences in the first 2 years. Babies who are exposed to difficult environments in those years are not destined to fail, but it may well be harder for them to thrive if this early brain development is impacted by severe emotional, physical, or environmental stresses. Another term is infant mental health, which has been developed over the past 50 years. Unlike adult mental health, infant mental health does not refer to disorders such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, personality disorders, though poor infant mental health may lead to these outcomes later on. Infant mental health more commonly refers to mental health in the positive sense, in terms of a baby maintaining optimal emotional and psychological development. Infant mental health is intrinsically linked to the quality of the relationship between infant and caregiver. The two are almost one and the same. So, what are the building blocks of infant mental health? What does good infant mental health or positive parent-infant relationship look like? Secure attachment is often considered the gold standard of infant mental health and the marker of a positive parent-infant relationship. A securely attached infant is able to explore the world in the knowledge that they have a secure base to return to in their primary caregiver. They know that someone is there to protect and support them in their exploration. Insecurely attached children are either overly needy of their parent or avoidant, whilst disorganised attachment is a mixture of the two, often due to unpredictable parenting and the infant not secure in the knowledge of the reliability of the support they might need and other important adults when they feel anxious. The insecure attachments are not wrong. They are the best adaptation a child can make to the emotional environment of their family. However, they mark areas of vulnerability to stress that might be a disadvantage later in life. Also, disorganised attachment does not inevitably lead to problems. It is best seen as sometimes marker for maltreatment when it does. Whilst attachment provides a useful framework for thinking about relationships, it is far from the whole story. Research is increasingly looking at the quality of moment-to-moment interactions between parents and infants, which is considered a good indicator of parent-infant relationships and infant mental health. Positive interactions are characterised by responsive, sensitive parents who notice babies' cues and engage in serve and return interactions, a bit like a conversational dance. This is often referred to as an attuned interaction. There is some evidence that the feel-good hormone oxytocin is released during these periods of connectedness. In fathers, it is released by rough and tumble play, and babies need the combination of both. So what promotes positive infant mental health? If broadly speaking, a positive parent-infant relationship is characterised by secure attachment and attuned interaction, what are the factors that make these things more or less likely? Before exploring these in further detail, it's worth briefly mentioning the ecological model. It's a way of understanding how individuals, or in this case the parent-infant relationship, exist in a wider context. Close family, extended family, and a wider social, cultural, political environment. All these elements can affect the quality of the infant mental health and development, not just the parents. What factors may promote positive attachment? Securely attached children are more likely to have parents who themselves have a secure attachment style, parents with higher reflective functioning, mind-mindedness, keeping the baby in mind, the ability to see the baby as a person with a mind of their own, wider social support from family and friends, a stable couple relationship. What factors can threaten the caregiver relationship? Insecure or disorganized attachment styles may appear in children where there are parental mental health problems, parental substance abuse, maltreatment, poverty, lack of social support and isolation, relationship difficulties, and domestic violence. None of these factors make it inevitable that a child will develop an insecure or disorganized attachment style. It is wholly possible for a parent to have mental health problems, but have a securely attached child, for example. This is more likely if there are other buffers such as wider social support and other available caregivers. So to look at services or interventions to improve the parent-infant relationship, the client is the relationship. This remark is often made in the context of parent-infant psychotherapy, but it applies to most interventions that are seeking to improve the parent-child relationship. Rather than working with the parent or the baby, or even both, these interventions are working with the interaction and emotional overlap between the two, as though the relationship itself is the person of interest. Parent-infant psychotherapy is one of many interventions used to try to improve the relationship between parent and infant. So how can practitioners use the evidence on parent-infant relationships? I know you've got Carrie Oppenheim from the Early Intervention Foundation is going to go through much more of the current research. The evidence around the importance of the first 1001 days and the parent-infant relationship reinforces the importance of the work that all who come into contact with families in the early years across health, education and social care should prioritise. Support for families where there are difficulties with attachment and attunement does exist and should be signposted to. So, some key messages to take home. Research into infant brain development shows that the first 2 years are a critical period for child's potential social, emotional, and cognitive development. These skills are largely developed through interaction with others, particularly primary caregivers. This does not mean that things are set in stone in the first 1001 days, but for babies who have a difficult start, it may be harder to thrive. A positive relationship between parent and baby is characterised by a positive attachment and attuned interactions. Not all parents and babies will enjoy secure attachment or attuned interactions, for various reasons, some outside of parents' control. It's important not to make parents feel guilty if they are struggling, but to empower them and model sensitive, responsive interactions. There are different support options available for parents and infants, from universal to targeted programs, which aim to improve the relationship. So how can you get involved further? Well, we are in a privileged position that we have money available as a charity to set up 3-year services of PIP services that we're looking to match fund with key third sector partners and statutory partners. It is about creating a sustainable partnership. Many health visitors I work with will say we're identifying some of the areas of need of vulnerable families, yet we have nowhere to refer them on to. It's exactly the reason why PIPs have come into being, because there is a deficit of psychotherapeutic provision across the country for onward referrals for frontline professionals. So we're here to set up PIPs with you if you're interested. I'm at the exhibition stand at lunchtime if you want to know more. Become a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group. and register your organisation for our second Infant Mental Health Awareness Week this year, which is the 12th to the 16th of June. And the theme is going to be pregnancy, getting back to where it all begins. Thank you very much.